If you have said to yourself, I should write that, or if someone has said to you, you should write that, then I'm talking to you because you need to write. And that's why you're tuned in to yWrite. Hi, welcome to yWrite. I'm your host, Angela Grout, and I thank you for tuning in for another episode of yWrite, where we meet writers and find out why they're writing so that you can figure out why you should be sitting to write your story too. Today, I have a writer of dark fiction coming on the show. And let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. He's from Western Massachusetts, and he's been writing dark fiction for like over 20 years. He once owned a comic book store, which is pretty cool, right here from East Hampton. He was invited to compete in the U.S. Olympic Tae Kwon Do in 2001. And since then, he has earned a 5th degree black belt. So, you can see where he's, got this energy inside him that's going to come out in a book. He has written 9 books and counting. And I want to welcome to the show Jeff VanOudenhove.
Hello.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Sure.
I mean, you have written 9 books, a series of 3, a series of 5. I mean, you have they're psychological suspense thrillers. You have The Alphabet Killer, Just Listen, The Letterman. I mean, Screams in the Dark and Other Twisted Tales. I mean, these are some pretty twisted tales.
Yeah.
What made you go into writing dark fiction, these psychological thrillers?
Yeah. Well, I actually started when I was writing when I was younger. I actually was writing poetry.
Oh.
Which is very different.
Dark poetry or romantic
no,
poetry?
Kind of romantic poetry. Yeah, I'd write romantic poetry, and I just felt like the words were kind of flowing out of me, and I felt like I had a knack for writing. But at the same time, I also the movies that I would watch were darker movies. I'd always like.
I would say romantic comedies?
No, not romantic comedies. Horror movies, things with twists, stuff like that. So I liked the idea that stories are being taken in one direction and then it just completely flips.
Yeah, and your stories definitely do. I mean, there are a lot of whodunit stuff in it, which of course I love whodunits. I mean, I wrote April Rain, and it's a whodunit. So I get when you're writing and you're able to control the story a little bit to make that twist, but you also throw in some of that really dark and horror stuff.
Right.
Is that from watching movies?
I think it might be. I mean, I liked reading, when I was younger, I liked reading Stephen King. I don't read as much Stephen King anymore. I liked Edgar Allan Poe. I liked reading nonfiction books that had to deal with, not meaning to scare anybody, but like serial killer stuff or things like that, for whatever reason, it just interested me.
Yep.
So
that interested me too.
Yeah,
it is why does that interest you?
Yeah, right. So I kind of leaned in that direction for the stories that I've written. I
mean, we write what we know, and whether we know it firsthand or knowing it from, obviously reading and taking in our outside influences.
Right.
And and what we enjoy. So I want to ask you the question that I want answered.
Sure.
As a writer.
Yeah.
When you're writing like this, dark and scary and mysterious stuff, did you get nervous doing it?
No, not at all.
No?
That doesn't bother me at all. And I don't know, I don't consider my books scary at all. I don't consider them horror.
They're more whodunits.
And I just have this idea in my head, and I just start writing, and I have no idea where the story's going to take me. It just starts coming out, and I may end up in a different place than where I started.
Do you outline?
I do not.
Okay, so you just sit. Are you a binge writer?
Well,
because I can be a binge writer.
No, so what I do is kind of maybe a little different than a lot of people. Is I will just start writing what I feel should be chapter titles.
Okay.
And I like coming up with really cool names.
That's a good outline right there.
Yeah, but I have no story.
You don't know what's in it.
I have no idea what's in the chapter. So I write these what I feel would be some grabbing titles that people might read the title of that chapter and go, ooh, I want to keep reading about that. So I'll write out about 20, 25 chapter titles. and I have no idea what's in them, but I just write them out. And then as I start writing the first chapter, based on that chapter title, I know what I want to be in that chapter, the first chapter, I should say, because I really only know the beginning of the story, and I really only know the end of the story. I have no idea what's going to happen in between. But as I write the first chapter, which is, trying to meet the title of that name, I also know that it has to connect to my second chapter somehow, that name. So
do you write chronologically like that?
I do.
You go right flowing right to the next chapter?
Yep, I go right to the next chapter, and once it connects to that next chapter, I start going, okay, now I have to write something that meets that chapter title, but it also has to connect to the next chapter title and stay with the art.
I've done that, especially with my second and third book. My fourth book that's not published just yet, I just started writing like the random chapters, coming up with the title. So when you said that, I'm like, I totally get that. Like I was like, okay, I know this is a chapter, this is a chapter. And I literally would just pick the chapter I wanted to write that day.
Yeah.
Be like, okay, I'm going to write it. But it definitely is making editing a little bit more laborsome because, you want the flow to go. Right. So I'm like, okay, I know where these chapters go, but now I got to make sure it flows. So when you're writing chapter 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, I mean, you have a nice smooth.
I do. Only one time I can recall that I actually went out of order. It was in my second book. I had this idea of this character and what I wanted this character, the storyline of this character to be, and I couldn't wait to get it out. It was just so prevalent in my mind, and I'm like, no, I got to get this down in writing. So I skipped like 3 chapters just to get to this one chapter that I really wanted to. I was so interested in writing, and I think that's the only time I've ever done that.
I mean, you have a great following of audiences right now, for sure. You have great reviews on Amazon. I mean, it seems like people are sitting at the edge of their seat waiting for that next book.
Well, I hope that continues.
Yeah. I mean, did you intend to write series?
No. I only intended to write one book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a
sort
kind
of
of
me too.
Yeah,
I think that happens.
It's kind of a different story. I wanted to write one book. I always wanted to write a book since I was a kid, and I decided that I'm gonna finally do this as an adult. I started saying this, so I started writing. I started writing on my lunch break at work. So I would write for a half an hour.
What do you do for work?
I'm a project engineer.
Okay.
So
well, I guess you're engineering a book. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're at lunch hour and you're scribbling.
So I'm at my lunch and I'm just typing away, and I did that for quite a while. I think I wrote 3 chapters of a book that I thought was pretty interesting, but then I just kind of got busy and I put it aside and didn't touch it for years. One day I was cleaning out my computer with files, and I came across the file, and I said, I got to read this. So I read the chapters that I had written, and I said, wow, that sounds pretty good. And it kind of sparked me. Yeah. So I started writing it again, and I had this idea. I said, you know what? I'm going to write this book. I'm gonna finish this book. I'm gonna figure out how to get this thing published, and I'm gonna give it to my mom as a surprise, as either for her birthday or for Christmas. And I thought that would be something that she would look at and think that was really something cool and proud, So I started getting really heavy into writing the story, and I was about 3/4 of the way through the book, and my mom passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's and so she never knew that I was writing.
She knows now.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
I can reassure you she knows now.
Yeah, so she never got to see the finished product. But after she passed away, I kind of lost all motivation to write, for quite a while. And just before COVID hit, a coworker of mine, he just kind of stood up over his cubicle wall and looked at me and said, hey, whatever happened to that book you were writing? And whatever it was just that comment, I said, yeah, I should get back into that. And that day I went back home and I wrote, and I did it every day since then.
We're going back to 2020.
Well, it was the beginning of
the
pandemic. It was the end of 2019, and then the start of 2020, and I just said, you know what, I'm doing this thing because my mom would want me to finish this. So I was writing that first book, and way back when I first started it, when I had written 3 chapters, I printed one of the chapters out and I fed it to a friend of mine.
Okay, I was going to ask, at what point did you feed it to someone? Because that's always a little scary part, where you're like, what do you think? I think it's great.
Right. And so she read it, and she right there, she looked at me and she said, oh my God, are you going to make this a series? And I said, no, I can't make this a series. This is just a one-time book. I'm writing this one book.
One and done, that's what we say.
That was it. So I had no plans to write a series. But after my coworker kind of created that spark in me again, and I decided that I was all in, I was going to go for it, I got about, I probably had about 3 or 4 chapters left of the book, and I started hearing her voice in my head saying, are you going to make this a series? And so I said, well, this would be interesting. What could I do to make this a series? So I just kind of changed a little bit within the storyline, and ended up making it a series, which turned out to be 5 books, which was written all through COVID.
And I was just going to say, like, we are talking in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, 9 books.
Right.
I mean, that's 5 books a year is a lot.
Yeah,
to write.
I mean,
and
I thought
publish
so.
and get all that done. What is your I mean, once you have your finished manuscript,
Yep.
I'm gonna guesstimate it's taken you like 3-4 months to write a manuscript.
These days it takes me probably about 6 months, but you got to remember this was all of a sudden COVID hit.
Right, you had plenty of time.
So that's all I had to do. There was nothing else to do. So I was writing every single day, and I would write for hours and then go about my business and then write for hours the next day. So I ended up writing the series, the 5 books. I think it was 1 year and 3 months that I wrote the series. And when I finished it, I mean, COVID, I think, was still going on. But
it's over now, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, everything went quickly. Nowadays, because there's other things that are going on in the world and stuff like that, I'm not writing as quickly as I was, because I try to write. When I come home from work, I try to write for about an hour or 2, and then on the weekends I get a little bit extra time, but still, life happens. And
and it's hard. I mean, during the pandemic, I mean, I agree. I introduced myself to all these online writing groups, and really got to buckle down and work on some projects that I wanted to do, and kind of got the bug of I want to do this more. I want to do this more, and now here I am with a show talking about writing.
Very good.
So you get that manuscript.
Yep.
And then you go through the editing, you go through the formatting process.
Yep.
How did you get to the publication process and picking your your covers and even picking the size of the book? Because I mean, I'm a fan of authors whose books are kind of all the same size, like especially in the series, right. So it's just cool, like the aesthetic look of it.
Yeah. So I had no idea about how to get my book published, but my wife was kind of leading me in the right direction, saying, you got to do some research. And like you, I joined a writers group.
Yes.
And that
You're with the Whip City
tremendously.
Writers in Westfield.
Yes, the Whip City Wordsmiths. Yep.
Wordsmiths. Yes.
And that helped tremendously with a couple of different things. One, it gave me an outlet to be able to read some of my chapters that I'd written to get feedback from people.
Yeah. So I'm just going to explain. I mean, there's different kinds of writing groups that people belong to, and from what I see, like with the Wordsmiths, the Whip City Wordsmiths, you come in with your written pages and you share them and you get your feedback.
Yeah, I mean, we discuss things like publishing and how to get your book out there and things like that. Trying to publicize your book through different ads and things like that. But a lot of it, after we discuss those topics, a lot of it is people within the group, they've brought things that they've written and they want feedback. They want to be able to know what they can do to improve.
It's so important to have a support group like that, the networking group, and just to kind of bounce ideas off each other and things. Yep. I mean, you don't hear about it enough. I mean, I know, there's famous musicians who get together with other famous musicians just to kind of bounce the ideas off of each other.
Right.
And it's just the writing community, I just think, is such a warm, welcoming community everywhere.
Right.
We all just want to see each other succeed, and we want to help each other, and that's why we're on yWrite, to help people saying this is how we do this. So how did you get your publisher? What did you do?
So I did a lot of research. YouTube videos are a wonderful thing. You can find anything, right? So I was doing a lot of research. I was doing research on traditional publishing. I was doing research on self-publishing. And again, with the help of the Whip City Wordsmiths and their remarks regarding both, because there's been members who have been traditionally published and who self-publish, I started leaning more towards the self-publishing route. I knew it was going to be a little easier because
it's faster.
It's faster, yeah, and you may never get picked by a traditional publisher. And I wanted, for my first book, I just wanted something out there. I wanted something that I had physically in my hand, and if I had to wait 10 years to get it done, I probably would have given up.
Yeah, well, it's hard when you're waiting on a third party to do something for you.
Right.
Even though, the mainstream, market, if you're going to become a millionaire writing a book and be a James Patterson or something, like, you kind of need that publishing house, the agents and things.
Right.
But when you're writing books, to get them published, to do it yourself, yes, it's a little bit of investment and time, but you can get it done in a very timely manner.
That's right.
Instead of saying, okay, this is, I wrote the book 10 years ago and it took, Simon & Schuster 10 years to get it on a bookshelf,
Right.
because I'm not trying to put Simon & Schuster down, because if you want to call me and take my books, I'm more than happy to talk to you. So is Jeff.
That's
but,
right.
It's just the way the world is now. We
right.
tend to do a lot of independent things.
Yeah, and I just felt that, I wasn't interested in, I'm not going to sell 1 million copies. I'm not going to be a best-selling author. Well, I wasn't thinking that would be the first book, of course. But I said, I just want something. Because, like I said, my original intention was to give this book to my mom for Christmas or birthday or something. And so I wanted this physical book. I wanted to feel like I had accomplished what I set out to do for my mom.
What a great feeling holding that first baby.
That's right. Yeah. So I ended up going the self-publishing route, and I found that it wasn't difficult. I thought it was going to be a really difficult process, but at least for me, I know other people have had some complications and things like that, but it seemed to go pretty smooth for me. Just got to follow what the videos tell you and follow the instructions, and I was able to get that first book. And that first book, when it arrived, it was like I was like ecstatic.
I remember, like, you open the box, you're a little nervous to open it, and you're like, oh, it's coming.
That's right. Yeah, and so I proved that the proof copy that they sent me, and I was like, just feeling all giddy,
Yeah.
And then boom, it was live on Amazon. And I just, I at first I didn't feel comfortable about this, but looking back now, I was like, it's perfectly okay. I ended up sending out this blanket email to everybody in my work, just saying, hey, look at what I just did, and I ended up getting quite a bit of sales from that. So it made me feel
it's hard
like,
to do self-promotion sometimes,
it is.
because you're like, hey, look what I did, and then you're like, oh, did that sound too, self-promoting? But that's part of the job of an author, is you have to promote your stories.
Right. And as for the size of the books, I went through Amazon, and I had no idea exactly what I wanted as far as the format of my books. I knew I wanted the physical paperback book, and they give you a bunch of different options for sizes, and I hadn't even been thinking hardcover or anything like that. So I just picked a size. I took out a tape measure, and I went like this, and I measured a bunch of books on my bookshelf.
Yes.
And I said, boy, what's the most common one? And the funny thing is that they say that the most common book size for this genre is 6x9. And yet I have this bookshelf, I have this whole library, and most of the books were 5x8.
Yeah. So
I said, well, I'm going to go with 5x8 because it seems like that's what I have. So I ended up picking 5x8. And then later on, when I discovered that I could start making hardcovers, but through a different publishing company, they didn't have 5x8, and I was like, oh, I couldn't do 5x8. But I didn't want the 6x9 seemed really big to me, and so I looked to see what both companies had that were the same size, that were in common, and 5.5 by 8.5 both companies had. So I ended up doing my next books in 5.5 by 8.5, which allowed me to also print hardcovers as well. So
that's very cool. Yeah. So you can almost go to two publishers since you're doing it yourself with the same book. Yeah, which is nice, because if you're with a publishing company, you're just kind of locked in just with them. So it's nice that you can do that. Did you use someone local?
No, I went through, my first thing is through KDP, which is Amazon's publishing site, and then the other one was Ingram Spark.
Oh, yeah. I've been looking into that Ingram Sparks. We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in doing that, because I know with Ingram Sparks, as opposed to Amazon, Ingram Sparks can help to move your books into libraries and into bookstores.
Yep.
Whereas Amazon, you kind of stay online. If you wanted to go into the Barnes & Noble bookstore, you kind of have to market it yourself.
Right.
to each individual bookstore, sort of.
And now, because I went through Ingram Spark with my later books, I can, Barnes & Noble now carries my later books, and they wouldn't have done that if it was only through Amazon.
I just saw you at the book signing a couple months ago over there. You have are you doing the one in Westfield in at the end of September or something? Yeah, there's another art walk or something.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
And they always have some really great local authors.
Yep, I'll be part of that.
Yeah,
I mean, haven't been accepted yet, but I
no, but you definitely participate in a lot of the local events.
That's right.
And then just marketing your books and getting the sales out there. It's difficult for like a local,
it is.
because you're looking more local sales, and
That's
then
right.
when you throw it on Amazon, of course we're going globally, but it's still a whole other
'cause,
marketing twist.
Yeah, nobody knows you, nobody's heard of you, and
So, the audience hasn't read your books, but they're going to. They're going to click the links and all that stuff to get them. But what I found interesting is you use some towns in Massachusetts. Like, there's a detective in Southbridge. I'm trying to think what the other one. Southbridge jumps out at me, but there's
Somerset.
Somerset, yeah, because my cousins are in Somerset. Did you specifically choose them for a reason? I mean, I know it doesn't say Massachusetts.
That's right. It doesn't say Massachusetts. So actually, there's more references to Massachusetts in my first 5 books, the series, that but they're kind of hidden. But with Southbridge,
I love that. There's
Somerset,
like the little tiny hidden things to find.
Yeah, it was completely, believe it or not, unintentional. I was just thinking of names that sounded good, and I was quickly looking at a map, and I wasn't even looking at a map of Massachusetts. It was more kind of the whole East Coast or whatever.
I was thinking England.
No. And I saw Southbridge, and it didn't even dawn on me that Massachusetts has a Southbridge.
Yeah.
So I used Southbridge without even realizing or without even thinking in my head that, wait a minute, there's a Southbridge here in Massachusetts, until the book came out, and a coworker of mine who grew up in Southbridge said, "Why didn't you tell me the character was going to be living in Southbridge? I could have told you all about it." And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" I said, "I can't believe I didn't even think that Southbridge was here in Massachusetts." So really, even though it's Southbridge, and people can believe it's Southbridge, Massachusetts, but in my head, I'm like,
if there's a Southbridge, Nebraska, if someone's in Nebraska, they're going to think that, which is kind of nice that it's can be kind of relocated.
Yeah, and I tried to keep the city very generic, just describing that it was a kind of a darker place, and in my head, I had the older days of New York City where it was really crime ridden and all that kind of stuff. So
you can see the smoky streets.
Yeah, exactly. So that was in my head. As far as Somerset, I didn't even realize there was a Somerset, Mass. Until you mentioned it yourself. So when I came up with the Somerset Psychiatric Institution, it was just, I was thinking of what would be a cool name for a psychiatric institution that is dark, but at the same time, the name of the institution makes it sound like it's a nice, refreshing place to be. And I figured Somerset.
Well,
Somerset,
and writing fiction, we have the license to do that, to create places, which is really nice. Whereas I've, had some guests on who do historical fiction and who are actually, writing biography things where you have to do the research on these towns.
Yep.
So the fact that, when we, and I say we, and I created Timmingsley for April Rain, it is just like that fictitious town, but if the town exists somewhere, people end up having, resonates with them, which is nice.
That's
and
right.
You didn't have to actually do, the research that sometimes requires permission.
Yeah, I mean, I did do research not on the name or anything like that. I just came up with the name, but I wanted it to be in a specific location. So actually, that is in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But it's not, Somerset's not the name of a town. It's just I came up with the name of a facility, and then it's located in a different town in Pennsylvania. And there's. I was once told by a reader that I didn't put enough description of where the location is. So after
they want to
that,
go find it.
Yeah. So after that, I decided I have to start putting where my stories take place.
Yeah. So I go to Florida quite a bit to visit my cousin, and I'll be down in Punta Gorda, and I start taking little locations. I'm like, maybe I should set it here, and I'm taking the local newspapers. So I'm like, you never know. Maybe I'll use something from this, but.
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, you say that because in one of my books, I opened up a map like I always did, and I wanted my character to go down to Florida, and I just kind of picked a place that was about 15 minutes away from the beach because I wanted my character to walk to the beach, and I picked this location. Coral Springs,
Okay.
Florida.
Yeah.
And about 6 months later or something like that, after the book was out, I went on vacation, and we were going down to Florida, but not anywhere
Did
there.
you go? Did you do? We're here for research.
So my wife was driving, and we were going from one part of Florida to another, and we were going to stay at this another hotel. And we were going out to eat to a restaurant, and we're at this four-way intersection. And I look over and I see this sign, and it says, "Welcome to Coral Springs, Florida." And I said, "Does that what?" I'm looking at it, and I started getting all excited because I was like, "That's what."
It's like a little confirmation from the universe.
I had no idea that I was.
I meet my characters sometimes. Like I'll go out and Jessica Briggs is the main character in April Rain, and I have had days where I like show up at places. They're like, "Hi, my name's Jessica," and then I go somewhere. Hi, and I'm like, "Why am I meeting all these Jessicas today?"
Right.
I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm manifesting you into life. What's going on?" Yeah, and the towns and stuff like that. So I have so many more questions I want to ask you. So you have, this here is the alphabet killer.
Yes.
And I know that, writing it takes a lot of time, but you're also solving a crime.
Yes.
Where's the inspiration for these crimes come from?
Oh, the crimes just came out of my head.
Okay.
I wanted this unique killer to be selecting his targets and killing them in very unique ways, but that fit a pattern for the police to be able to follow. So I was just, although it's all just made up in my head, I wanted to come up with these great ideas.
Thank God you're writing it and not living it.
Yeah, I started writing ideas down, like, how can this person die? How can this person die? How can this person? And everything had to be in a certain sequence,
The things, if someone reads our notebooks or sees what we Google, they're like, what is wrong with that?
Right.
Like I've Googled like how to transport a dead body over cross state lines.
Yeah, right.
Like, what are you writing that for? So I could see someone seeing your list going, oh, how can I kill her this way? How can I kill her? They're like, what is Jeff writing about?
And I was also very fortunate to, I teach martial arts, and one of my students at the time when I was writing that book, he was a captain in the police force. He's now the chief of police.
Nice.
So that's great. So I was able to reach out to him, and I could text him at any time.
Do any of these stories have some martial arts in there? Do you have a character who's a martial artist?
Not
happening
yet?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Come on, you gotta write what you know. I mean, you're a fifth degree black belt.
Keep telling me that. Yeah,
it's
I haven't.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So 9 books are here on the table.
Yes.
We have a 10th book.
Yes, coming out. Coming out in a few months, I think.
Okay, so you're finishing that up. So there's no stopping you now.
Well, I'm going to keep going.
Got to go at least for the dozen or the
maybe.
baker's dozen. Got to keep going.
I got to reach as far as I can, as fast as I can, I guess, before I'm gone. Right?
Yeah. Well, we can't, like Wayne Dyer said, you can't keep your music inside you.
Right.
You got to get it out.
That's
so and at a certain age, I think we start a little panic of going, okay, we got to get this out.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
Yep.
So where can the audience get your books and find out more information about you?
Yeah. So all of my books are available on Amazon. You can search out either my name, Jeff VanOudenhove, which is difficult to spell.
Jeff VanOudenhove?
Yeah. Or Javo Publication. It's
Javo.
Publication. And all of my books should come right up for you.
All right. Well, I'm so glad that you came into the studio today so we could discuss all of this. I mean, we've been talking for years, and I'm just glad that we finally connected so that, the audience can learn about you and your books and, learn your writing process because it might help somebody else's writing process.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
So thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to another episode of yWrite. I appreciate you. I appreciate Studio 954 for allowing us to have this show because each week it's just interesting and intriguing and inspiring, and I just love the fact that we can reach out to you right in your homes or on YouTube or wherever you are subscribing to watch this show. This is the time of the show where I'm going to give you a writing prompt. So what I want you to do is pick up your pen, and I'm going to today go off of what Jeff had said about writing chapter titles. And, that's a really good jumping off point for someone who, if you're writing a memoir or if you have a fictional story or, wherever you want to be writing. It might even be for business. Like perhaps you have to give a, speech or give instructions to a class or to some employees. Start writing, the bullet points, but make them interesting chapter titles. Can you come up with at least 5 chapter titles that you want to write about? And, set your timer for 5 minutes and just get that pen on the page and start writing. All right. Thank you so much for tuning into yWrite, and I will see you next time.